Warren Buffett was born in the midst of the Great Depression, at a time when the country was plunging into financial chaos. Since then, he has witnessed crises, booms, and upheavals that have left their mark on entire generations. In this video, we'll explore how his early experiences, combined with a unique perspective on the world of finance, reveal deep truths about inflation, trade, markets, and the resilience of the United States. This is the story of a collapse that changed everything, told by someone who saw it with his own eyes as a child. The trauma of a generation born at the heart of the crisis. Warren Buffett was born on August 30th, 1930, in the middle of an economic storm that would leave a permanent mark on the United States, the Great Depression. His birth coincided with a time when millions of Americans were losing their jobs, their savings, and for many, their hope. Howard Buffett, his father, was a stockbroker at a small local bank. Until recently, he had made a living selling stocks to ordinary people dreaming of wealth. But when the market collapsed by 48% in the blink of an eye, those same people who had bought securities from him were left ruined. In this situation, Howard simply stopped going to work. There were no clients, no sales, no future. Buffett recalls that his family lived modestly. They crowded into a simple house with a small garden. It was winter, they had no television, and his father stayed home all day. In those conditions, 9 months after the stock market crash, Warren was born. For many, the Great Depression is just numbers in a history textbook. For him, it was the emotional environment in which he grew up. In the first years of his life, the economy wasn't just in decline, it was crippled. What seemed like just another crisis turned into a drawn-out catastrophe. At the time, no one thought they were facing a depression. Everyone believed it was just another temporary recession. But they were wrong. The scariest part is that the bank where his father worked permanently closed not long after Warren's birth. Jobless, with 2 children and no means of support, the family had to turn to Buffett's grandfather, who owned a grocery store, for help. He let them buy food on credit. This seemingly simple gesture made the difference between hunger and survival. 1929 to 1954, 25 years without stock market growth. The scale of what happened between 1929 and 1954 can't be measured in numbers alone. The Dow Jones, the most well-known stock index in America, peaked at 381 points just before the 1929 crash, and then plummeted to 41 points by 1932, losing nearly 90% of its value. Put simply, if someone had invested $1,000 in the market on Warren Buffett's birthday, less than 2 years later that money would be worth just $170. A devastating blow to Americans' faith in their financial system. Most disturbing of all, the market didn't return to 1929 levels until 1954. For 25 full years, stocks could not regain their former value. An entire generation of investors lived with the memory of what felt like an endless collapse. It left a deep psychological scar. 1929 became a symbol, a cultural code. Mentioning it was like talking about war, a sacred date, a warning. Buffett remembers that the fear was still in the air even when the market finally began to recover. When the Dow Jones finally surpassed 381 points in 1954 for the first time in 25 years, everyone was asking the same question: was this another 1929? The memories were so vivid that Congress launched a special investigation to determine whether a new financial bubble was forming. People simply couldn't believe the growth was real. The ghost of the crash haunted them, and any sign of euphoria was met with suspicion. That collective suspicion held back economic growth for many years. Solid companies with strong balance sheets were undervalued because the memory of the crash clouded people's judgment. Buffett's generation grew up with that emotional scar. And that largely explains his caution, dislike of excessive debt, and commitment to long-term investing based on intrinsic value. What saved the system? The creation of a Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. One of the most critical aspects of the Great Depression was not just the stock market crash, but the loss of trust in banks. More than 4,000 banks failed between 1929 and 1933. It wasn't just about financial institutions, it was about millions of people who overnight lost all their savings and trusted to what seemed like reliable organizations. That bitter experience, repeated across the country, shattered faith in financial stability. Buffett describes that period without sugarcoating it. Thousands of families across all 48 states watched the fruits of years of labor turn to dust. The fear caused by the collapse of the banks was stronger than any economic cycle. It was a collective trauma that affected all levels of society, all regions, and all generations. If you can't trust banks, then who can you trust? That question haunted everyone. The solution came in 1934 with the creation of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC. This organization guaranteed each citizen the safety of their deposits up to a certain amount, even if the bank went bankrupt. This simple guarantee changed everything. People began bringing their money back to banks, and the broken trust slowly started to recover. For Buffett, the creation of the FDIC was one of the greatest achievements in U.S. political history. He's convinced that if it had been established earlier, the Great Depression would have taken a very different path. A stable banking system could have stopped the panic at its onset. This example shows how well-thought-out measures to protect ordinary citizens can have a profound and long-lasting impact on the health of the entire system. The American miracle: why Buffett never bet against it. Born in the midst of economic chaos, Warren Buffett grew up with a deep faith in the potential of the United States. Over time, that belief not only remained, it strengthened. He expresses it very clearly: if you had simply bought a representative portion of the market, shares of American companies, and just held onto them without selling, your investment would have grown more than 100 times. This isn't an empty claim. It's backed by facts. The economic growth of the United States has been consistent for a long time, despite crises, wars, recessions, and political turmoil. Buffett believes this country has a unique energy, a combination of innovation, talent, and resilience. Nothing could hold back that momentum for long. Even the darkest times, like the Great Depression or World War II, couldn't break it. Buffett doesn't need to check his stock prices every day or read alarming newspaper headlines. He knows that over time, the country produces more, consumes more, and innovates more. He believes it's a historic mistake to bet against the United States. For him, the so-called American miracle isn't a myth, it's a real force that has contributed to the prosperity of entire generations. He has followed this investment philosophy, patience, conviction, and long-term thinking, for more than 7 decades. And while it may sound simple, it runs counter to the frenzy and short-sightedness of today's financial world. While others sell out of fear, Buffett holds on with deeper confidence. Progress may be slow, but it is inevitable if you bet on the right horse. Inflation is a silent threat that's always present. It's not a sudden storm, but a constant drizzle that eventually soaks through everything. For Warren Buffett, inflation is as inevitable as the passage of time. Prices will be higher in 10, 20, or 30 years, he states with the calm of someone who's observed this for over 9 decades. What's frightening is not its existence, but the fact that so many people, then and now, pretend it doesn't exist. As if money under the mattress or in a savings book will hold its value. Inflation is, in essence, a hidden tax. It doesn't require votes or laws, just year after year, what used to cost $1 now costs $2. It's not a conspiracy, it's a natural mechanism of a growing economy, but also a result of chaotic financial policy, excessive deficits, and trade wars. Buffett has lived through all these cycles and knows, if you don't prepare, you lose. That's why he always emphasizes the importance of investing. Saving money without putting it to work is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. In the long run, what seems like a large sum today may not be enough to maintain the same standard of living tomorrow. The key is to invest that money in assets that grow in value, stocks of reliable companies, real estate, or index funds. Buffett doesn't try to time inflation cycles. He doesn't need to know when prices will rise, because he knows that they will rise. He's learned that the best defense isn't speculation, it's participation in a productive economy. That's why he's always avoided gold or cryptocurrencies. To him, it's companies, those that produce goods and services people need, that create real value, even during periods of inflation. International trade, the paradox of invisible benefit. Buffett has a clear stance on free trade. It benefits the country as a whole, but it can be extremely painful for individual people. And that's what makes it so hard to defend at a political level. The benefits of international trade are not obvious, they're vague, diffuse, almost invisible. But its downsides are painfully clear: shuttered factories, lost jobs, entire towns in decline. No one wakes up in the morning thinking about how cheap their TV is thanks to trade deals. No one expresses loud gratitude for the lower prices on shoes, clothing, or appliances. But when a textile plant in your town shuts down, when someone close to you loses their job because their industry is no longer competitive globally, that pain is direct and personal. That's why protectionist rhetoric is so appealing. It speaks more to the heart than to the mind. Buffett understands that. He acknowledges that telling a 60-year-old factory worker who spent his whole life on the line that he now needs to retrain for a new job sounds almost cruel. It's not a real solution, it's a way of dodging the problem. That's why he stresses that if a country chooses to continue supporting free trade, and it should, it also has to take responsibility for those who end up left behind. That means active policies for compensation, education, subsidies, and retraining. It's not enough to just say the market will take care of it. Concrete action is necessary to ensure that collective progress doesn't destroy individual lives. For Buffett, that is the real balance. It's not about shielding the economy from the world, it's about opening our eyes to those who need help most at home. Tariffs are like war and peace in the world of economics. When Warren Buffett talks about tariffs, there's a mix of skepticism and warning in his voice. Tariffs are a tax, he says. And the tooth fairy doesn't pay it, he adds wryly. This phrase reveals an uncomfortable truth. Although tariffs are presented as measures to protect the country, in the end, they hit the wallets of ordinary consumers. It's not just imported steel or cars that become more expensive, but also products on store shelves. Historically, tariffs have been used as a political tool to punish other countries or protect local industries. But in practice, they often trigger a chain reaction of retaliatory actions that escalate into trade conflicts, widely known as trade wars. Buffett believes that in such conflicts, there are no winners. In the end, both sides lose. Some face rising prices, others lose market access, and others deal with strained diplomatic relations. The main problem with tariffs is that they're used like a magic pill for complex problems. It's easy to blame another country for unemployment or a trade imbalance. But few are willing to dig into the causes of these issues within their own country. Why are certain industries uncompetitive? What can be done to fix the situation without resorting to such harsh measures? These are the uncomfortable questions politicians often try to avoid. Buffett doesn't deny that unfair competition exists in the world and that some countries try to gain unfair advantages. But he emphasizes that retaliatory restrictions aren't always the best strategy. Instead of building economic walls, he suggests building bridges of understanding, negotiating fair trade deals, and implementing domestic policies that foster real competitiveness. Because in the end, it's not China or Mexico that pays for tariffs, it's the ordinary families who go to the grocery store. The trade deficit is like selling the future for the sake of short-term comfort. One of the issues that has worried Buffett the most over the years is the United States trade deficit. To him, it's not just a number in an economic report, it's a troubling symptom of a country that consumes more than it produces. By importing more than it exports, the country is essentially financing its lifestyle at someone else's expense. It's like a family spending more than it earns, covering the difference with credit cards. In practice, it means the United States gives away dollars, paper, in exchange for real goods, cars, electronics, food, machinery. Those dollars eventually come back to the country in the form of investments, government bonds, real estate, even companies. In the short term, this might not seem like a problem. In fact, it may even seem convenient. But in the long run, these investments give other countries a degree of control over American assets and national wealth. Buffett gives a striking example. In the 1980s, Japan, with a huge trade surplus, used its dollars to buy iconic U.S. properties like Pebble Beach and Rockefeller Center. It wasn't an attack, it was the logical result of imbalance. If another country accumulates your checks, it has the right to use them however it wants, and that includes buying parts of your economy. That's why Buffett argues for keeping the trade deficit within reasonable limits. He's not proposing isolation from the world or strict controls. He's advocating for responsibility, living within our means, producing more, consuming mindfully, and maintaining a balance that doesn't jeopardize future independence. Because a nation too dependent on foreign credit is mortgaging its future for the comfort of today. The role of the president is not just to lead, it is to teach. In times of crisis, the figure of the president gains enormous symbolic and practical value. It's not only about managing, it's about communicating, explaining, enlightening. Buffett insists that every president should act as a teacher of the people, someone who can explain complex economic phenomena in simple terms. Franklin Roosevelt understood this well in the 1930s, during his famous fireside chats, radio broadcasts in which he explained what was happening and what actions would be taken. Economics isn't just numbers, it's trust, perception, hope. If people don't understand why certain measures are taken, or feel that decisions are being made that hurt them without explanation, the system breaks down from within. That's why transparency and education are so important in complex issues like trade or tariffs. To explain why a particular policy is necessary, who will be hurt by it, and how the losses will be compensated, that means choosing a united and strong country over a divided and weak one. Buffett understands that this is not easy. How do you explain to a textile worker in Massachusetts who lost his job because of globalization that his sacrifice serves the greater good of the country? Technical terms or empty promises won't help here. What's needed is genuine empathy, policies backed by real actions, and leadership that aims not only for voters' support but also for their understanding. Economic education should not be the privilege of universities or experts. It should become a tool of the state. An informed society is harder to mislead. It is more resilient in the face of uncertainty and better equipped to make balanced decisions. For Buffett, this is the main task of any modern president, not just to govern the country, but to help the people understand it. Buffett shows us that economic crises are inevitable, but they pass. What remains is the ability to adapt, to learn, and to keep thinking long-term. The United States, for all its imperfections, has proven time and again that it can rise after falling. Believing in its potential is not naive, it's understanding history. As Buffett says, betting against America has always been a bad idea.